minor little argument with my wife last night. You're driving how far to talk to a handful of people about this, and all the CO2 you're burning and all the energy you're using? So what I have to do is persuade you guys that at least some of you will take at least one less 7-hour trip in the next year, and then we'll be even. If 2 of you, because of this talk, take one less 7-hour trip, then we'll be ahead of the game, okay? So, anyway, sorry about that little distraction. Answer number 1. Remember, the question is, why does the environmental crisis matter, or does it matter? Answer number 1 is very simple. Self-interest. We're human beings. We depend on a healthy biosphere to live. We got to have water to drink. We have to have air to breathe. We have to have a world that doesn't have toxic chemicals in everything that we touch. The ecological or environmental crisis really is a crisis. It's real, and it's happening now. Now, we're running a little late tonight. I actually have a weekend seminar on this topic. I could give you 4 hours on this all by itself. I'm not going to do that. Let me just refer you back to the video, to the different things that you heard. The video was sort of the humanities approach to the problem. This chart is more an engineering approach to the problem. A number of people have looked at the Earth in terms of systems, okay? So, and what they've done is they've tried to determine where they can, and that's the green circle here, how much the Earth system can handle of a given disruption. So, for example, let's pick one, global freshwater use. The inner circle would show that that's about 50% of the Earth's capacity to handle what we're doing to it. This outer circle would be 100%, and anything beyond that outer circle means that that particular system is in trouble because we are stressing the Earth beyond its capacity to recover. So biodiversity loss. We're way off the chart here. We are losing species, they estimate, at perhaps 1,000 times the natural rate of extinction. Now, it is true, species go extinct all the time, but no one has ever seen the number of species going extinct at the rate that is happening right now. Here in North America, in the rainforests, all over the place. Atmosphere aerosol loading, that refers to air pollution, and these two, it says not yet quantified. No one has figured out how much is too much of air pollution and toxic chemicals. Climate change, we estimate that we are putting 50% more carbon dioxide in, well, we have put 50% more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than it can handle. Climate change is closely tied to ocean acidification, because one of the things that happens with the CO2 in the atmosphere is it gets absorbed by the ocean. The ocean turns more acidic. And an acidic ocean means that any creature that produces shells can't produce those shells because they get dissolved by the acidic water. And so corals are dying, shellfish are dying. Anything that has a shell, and that's an awful lot of the creatures in the ocean, are in trouble. Oops, sorry. Now this is an interesting one, ozone depletion. You will remember the ozone hole and so on. This was, back in the 70s and 80s, one of the first really serious global problems that the world faced and had to deal with. Discovered it was coming from fluorocarbons, from hairsprays and things like that. There was an international agreement to end the production of these chemicals that were known to be damaging the ozone. And the thing has reversed itself. It hasn't healed completely, but it is an example that's being held up as an example, a parallel situation to climate change. If we could do this with the ozone, why can't we do it with climate change? This is one you probably never heard of, the nitrogen cycle. This has to do with the fertilizers that we use to do modern agriculture in order to produce enough food for all the billions of people who live on Earth right now. Nitrogen occurs naturally in the biosphere. The biosphere can recycle a certain amount of it, but whenever we make nitrogen artificially, pump it into this, onto our fields or whatever, it cannot, we're doing it so fast that it can't be absorbed anymore, and the result is dead zones at the end of the Mississippi River and almost every other major river in the world. There's, I can't remember the size of it, but there's a huge area at the bottom of the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico where nothing can live. That's a nitrogen problem. Similar with phosphorus. Phosphorus isn't quite up to the green. So the point of all this is we are damaging the only home we have. And you guys need to be aware of this, because by the time you are my age or even halfway to my age, most of you aren't halfway to my age yet, so we can say that, the world is going to be different. You hear a lot about climate change, and that is one big, big problem, but it's not just climate change. It's water, it's energy. Start thinking $15 a gallon gasoline, because it's coming. It's inevitable that it's coming. And all these other problems. So, that's the ecological footprint concept, and this is the idea that right now we're using about 1 1/4 of the Earth's resources every year, which means we're accumulating an ecological deficit. This chart estimates under moderate business as usual, we'd be up to double the capacity of the Earth by 2040. This yellow line optimistically says we can get down to 1 by doing some rapid reduction, but nobody yet knows how to do that. The point of all of that, this isn't about whales anymore. It's about us. And this statement is being echoed by people in the environmental movement all the way across the spectrum. Christians, people who are secular. It's no longer spotted owls, it's not polar bears. Yes, they are in danger. But what we've suddenly woken up and realized is that it's us. For you guys, it's what happens in the middle of your career. It's what happens when you're trying to raise your children. For me, it's my grandchildren, maybe my great-grandchildren. It's coming, and it's going to hurt us. Answer number 2. Answer number 1 is not a Christian answer, it's just a human answer. Self-interest. If we care about ourselves and our family, we ought to care about what's happening in God's creation. Answer number 2 is a moral answer. It's a question of justice. The ecological crisis is driven by the rich, but overwhelmingly affects the poor first and worst. Now, the Exhibit A for this is what we expect to happen with climate change. Climate change comes with more extreme weather events, for example. And what happens when a hurricane comes across Haiti and then hits Florida? 2,000 people die in Haiti, 5 people die in Florida. What's the difference? Poverty. And if it's true, and the connection is tenuous, but one of the strong predictions of climate change theory is that as the Earth warms up, we will have more severe weather events. And this year we've had the tornadoes in Missouri, we've had the wildfires in Texas. 2 years in a row now we've got massive floods in Florida. As I speak, there is massive flooding throughout Southeast Asia and the Philippines, China, Thailand, and so on. I've just had an email from some folks there. Seems to be the entire region is underwater. Now, just as a footnote here, why is this happening? Because a warmer atmosphere can hold more water. This explains the Texas drought, because a warmer atmosphere can suck more water out of the desert. But once that water is in the atmosphere, it's got to come down sometime. It comes down as heavier rain events than we've ever seen before. And this is happening now. And when there's a flood, when there's a hurricane, it's almost always the desperately poor who get hurt more than anyone else. Even though it's been the rich who've pumped all the CO2 into the atmosphere. So, it's a question of justice between rich and poor, but this one ought to get your attention. It's also a question of justice between generations. Because you guys are inheriting a world that is possibly damaged beyond compare, and you didn't do it. Now, before we get too serious about that, here's Dilbert. Young guy talking to an old guy. Your generation is leaving my generation a dying planet and a crippling debt. Hee hee. But we shall extend life-extending drugs so that you will suffer along with us. We will connect you to machines and keep you alive until the poor demand to eat you. Well played. What can I say? I'm sorry. I'm sorry that back in the 1970s, my generation, didn't realize that the problem was bigger than rivers that were catching fire. Back in the 1970s, they were talking about climate change. They were talking about global warming. It was there. I have seen a Popular Science magazine article from 1954 talking about climate change. This is not a new problem. So as the older generation who is handing on a damaged world to you, I can say I'm sorry, but that doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference for you guys. But you're going to have to wake up. Your generation is. Now, when I was in, I was a little bit late for this, but my generation took on the Vietnam War. And I'm sure you've heard stories about the 60s and maybe talked to your parents or whatever. We tore this country apart to try and stop that war. Maybe it's time for you guys to wake up and say, hey old folks, give us our world back. And start to be active and do something to try and change the things that are happening. Because it's going to affect your lives very, very soon. Now, all of that's kind of depressing. The first answer was a simply self-interest. We're ruining the only home we have, and it's kind of dumb to do that. Human answer, not Christian, but still, if that's all we've got, it's enough to go on. Second answer is a moral answer. It's not right, it's not fair, it's not just, and we serve a God of justice, and we ought to respond to an issue of injustice like this. For you guys with the generational thing, the self-interest and the justice kind of blend together, don't they? Which is an interesting thing to think about. And that's a good answer, that's an ethical answer, but that still isn't a uniquely Christian answer to this question of, does the environmental crisis matter or not? So let's go to answer number 3. Theology. Here's the proposition. Jesus died to reverse the curse of our sin by reconciling all things to God. Let me get that bookmark and I'll explain it to you. Then we got some verses to go with it too. 4 symbols here. Relationship with God, relationship with myself, relationship with other people, relationship with God's creation. This is the gospel according to care of creation. This is actually what I like to call full redemption. And it's, I'll explain it to you with a couple of Bible verses in a minute, but here's in a nutshell. If we go back to the Garden of Eden, and when human beings first disobeyed God, you remember the story, it's in Genesis 3. You have Eve and then Adam eating the apple and disobeying God, and then Adam is in the garden, and we're told that God comes walking in the garden in the evening, and Adam is hiding. That's an indication of a broken relationship. Broken relationship. Adam couldn't face God anymore.